right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Obscuracast. This is our 8th episode of season 1. Hard to believe it's already our 8th episode, and things are tracking really well for the podcast. We've been looking at it pretty much every day to make sure that there's stuff moving in the right direction, and you guys are killing it. So we really appreciate all the support. I know we got a couple 5-star reviews, as well as, what are we up to? Almost 70 listens or so? We're getting up to almost 100, right, Dano?
Yeah, it's pretty close. Getting pretty close at triple digits.
Yeah, so we really appreciate you guys. Just to start off, if you guys want to follow our Instagram, we have Twitter and X pages up now. It's just at Obscuracast on both Instagram and Twitter. And then obviously we're on Spotify. We'll try to upload as many episodes for you guys as we can. We're trying to do it on a weekly basis, so we're trying to pump out content for you guys every week. So again, just really appreciate the feedback we've gotten from you guys. Like I said, we've had some reviews. That's always good too, to know that you guys are enjoying it, not just listens and people listening. And so, Dan, how's your evening going, sir? It's good to be back with you again.
Evening's going good. Buckeyes got a win. Penn State lost to UCLA, and Texas lost to Florida. So it's a good Saturday night, my friend.
I didn't see how my Spartans did today, but I'm assuming they probably lost.
I mean, we can check that out in 2 seconds here. The Spartans, the Fighting Spartans of the state of Michigan, did a phenomenal loss of 38-27 to Nebraska. That's not horrible though.
I was going to say that's actually 11-point loss to Nebraska is not actually that bad.
Yeah. I mean, you guys are in a rebuilding stage, so you'll be there.
Yeah, we'll get there. But in light of the podcast and everything, so tonight we're getting into sort of what's above us. So in saying that, we're talking about space and NASA, and I think Dan has a little bit of an agenda of what we're going to get into. We made some notes for ourselves, sort of what we wanted to talk about within the podcast. So we're going to get into some different stuff. Mainly, though, we're going to focus on the conspiracy theory side, like we do in Obscuracast. We like to talk about obscure topics and keep it sort of light and let the conversation sort of take its turns where it needs to. So, Dan, you want to sort of kick us off and what we're going to be talking about, or get us into our first topic?
Yeah, so basically this episode we're going to be talking about different interviews that NASA scientists and former astronauts and secret government files. They suggest that contact between Earth and extraterrestrial intelligence has happened. So it raises the possibility that NASA may be suppressing, hiding, or ignoring evidence of alien contact, or operating under constraints that prevent open disclosure. So I just want to go out there and tell everybody that, and Blake, you probably know this from my dad telling stories and stuff. My grandfather worked on the lunar landing modules for the Apollo missions. My grandfather was the last person to inspect the lunar landing modules before they got shipped down to NASA headquarters for the launch for the Apollo missions. Something my grandfather was obviously very proud of. My dad and my uncle, my family, very proud of. A huge history and moment for, not just our family, but the country. What's funny story is my grandfather told my dad and my uncle that he itched his initials, his name and his initials, on every single foot pad that got delivered to NASA. So, in theory, if he engraved his initials and his name on the foot pads of those lunar landing modules, technically, my grandpa and my uncle's name is on the moon.
It's pretty crazy.
When it landed, obviously.
Yeah, it would have left a footprint. But that's also one thing too, is that, we sort of watched some documentaries and did some research ourselves and what we sort of wanted to talk about. And the crazy thing about what you were talking about just now, as far as it being on the foot pedals, or like let's call it the landing gear or the landing, whatever, arms of those modules.
Yep.
They said something to the effect, and what I was able to gather from the material that we saw was it covered such a wide surface area that was a quote unquote reason for them not leaving imprints of those lunar modules, which I thought was interesting. So even if it was there you'd be hard pressed to probably see it if it was there at all.
Very true. And what a lot of people say, oh, there's there's no atmosphere on the moon, and that's where the whole conspiracy of, everything being filmed with the flag waving, there's no atmosphere and blah, blah, blah. There is a small atmosphere on the moon. There is. It's very small, but there is a very small atmosphere on the moon. So you do get a little bit of wind. That's why the flag in the film that you see does move. There is, imprints from a footpad. Can you see them now? Probably not, because that was, how many years ago that they were there. So, it's all very interesting. As far as beginning where we want to begin with this whole thing is there's essentially the history of NASA, I believe, was started in 1948 is when it was officially formed. And NASA not only does experiments in space, but NASA also does, and this is very interesting, is they're part of oceanography studies. So they study the ocean as well from space. And there's been a lot of black projects that NASA has been involved in with the ocean. And we can come back. I want to come back to that later on in the episode, not now. I think that right now we focus on the space aspect of NASA, but there is an ocean aspect of NASA that we also should focus on, and focus on the ocean in general, because we've talked about in past episodes that, and I know you have stated in past episodes that we know way more about the deep of space than we do about our own oceans. That's a very interesting aspect to NASA and just our scientists in general on this planet. But to get back to outer space NASA, you're kind of familiar with like World War II history, correct?
Yeah, to a certain degree. Also, to clarify, I just looked it up. According to Google, NASA was founded July 29th, 1958. So we were 10 years off.
58, I said 40. God
You
damn
said
it.
48. No harm, no foul, but
11
yeah,
years,
so,
son of a bitch.
yeah.
Okay. So, anyway, 59, you said?
58.
58. Okay. So 10 years off. So they were formed in 58. Are you familiar with like how that whole thing started? Like, what's your whole knowledge on that?
As far as it was originally contracted and formed as a part of the Department of Defense. At least from what I read, what I've heard about it. It was formed in the 50s, and it was something that I believe it was Eisenhower that signed it into existence. I'm pretty sure that's right.
Yes. Yep.
Which makes a lot of sense because Dwight Eisenhower was a pretty big face in the military sect of, like, it makes sense that it became the Department of Defense was the region of the government and our country that it sort of formed into based on him being the president at the time. It makes a lot of sense.
Well, and he was a war hero, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying is that it basically was a way to not only combat things that are on Earth, as well as things above us and below us. Now, NASA, essentially, like you said, it has some oceanic applications, but I would imagine that the primary reason it was formed in the first place was stuff above us. I think we can both agree on that.
Yeah, so it was primarily made because of that. The whole conspiracy theory of Area 51 and the Roswell crash, alien crash of Roswell, and that was 1947 that Roswell happened, supposedly. And actually, his granddaughter, Eisenhower's granddaughter, is a huge UFO, UAP advocate. She has stated multiple times that her grandfather met with extraterrestrials and they agreed upon extraterrestrial human studies and abduction and space, alien space material exchanges and all sorts of stuff. So there's a very interesting history between Eisenhower and the UAP community. Also, what's very interesting is Eisenhower, the military industrial complex was created under Eisenhower. And then when Eisenhower left the presidency, if you listen to his exit speech, it was basically a warning about the military industrial complex. So I highly suggest that our listeners go and find that recording, because you can go ahead and find that recording, listen to that, because Eisenhower is giving a very grim warning about the military industrial complex, and if like it hits home today, let's just put it that way.
So
But
essentially, it's the good, bad, and the ugly of the armed forces in general, not just one sect of it, correct?
yeah, and the privatization of the business of military and how they're going to create conflict, because in order for them to be in business, they're going to need
Point of the Department of Defense is to defend the country and its borders. So I mean, if there's not some kind of conflict going on, those people aren't getting paid, they don't have careers, they don't have jobs, they don't have anything.
Yeah, to an extent, they're going to need wars. So if there's no wars to be had, they're going to go fucking find them and create them. So that's kind of where that shit starts. But what is interesting with NASA is, have you heard of Werner von Braun?
Yeah, I believe Werner von Braun was I might be throwing it out here, Soviet scientist, correct?
So he was. Very good. He was.
The reason I know that, and if you guys are Jake Gyllenhaal fans,
not Soviet. He was Nazi SF.
Okay, so he was Germany then. Okay, got it.
Yes.
So if anybody hasn't seen this film, if anybody else is a Jake Gyllenhaal fan like myself, if you've never seen the movie October Sky, phenomenal movie.
Great movie.
The movie is based on the four gentlemen from, oh my gosh, I'm going to blank on it. I think they were from, I got to look it up. It's going to bother me. But essentially the movie is about Homer Hickam, who was one of the four, I wouldn't say forefathers, but very instrumental in the Apollo missions. I think he was one of the top, aeronautic people that were able to oversee it.
He was for the rocketry.
Yeah. The propulsion system, correct. Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
But it's a great movie.
He worked with Werner von Braun.
It's a great movie. It's got him, Chris Cooper, and a couple other really, really good actors. But essentially, it's about a team of four guys from high school that essentially become NASA employees. It's a really, really good movie. But back to what we were saying. But yeah, so the reason I know about Werner von Braun in the first place, at least like who he is, might have got the nationality wrong, so I apologize for that. But essentially, he was the scientist and the one that Homer Hickam emulated. It caused like a big rift, and it's a very, very, very good film. But it gives some sort of like Hollywood context to what NASA was, as far as like those group of kids going from high school students that did like a rocketry project in high school and won like a science fair and that kind of stuff, to them being actually government employees at NASA. So it's a really, really good film.
Yeah, and they use mathematics, like Einstein's theory and a bunch of different mathematics to disprove that their rocket causes fire in the one forest. And that was West Virginia, right? I want to say.
That's a great question.
West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Southern Pennsylvania.
Let me see.
Something like that. But either way, very great movie if nobody's seen October Sky.
Colwood, West Virginia is where it takes place.
Okay, cool. Big mining town, obviously, and hats off to those guys.
With a town name like Colwood, it's only fitting, right?
Yeah. So as far as Werner von Braun goes, Werner von Braun, he worked on the V2 rocket. That was from 1933, 1945. He was a big advocate on rocketry and space exploration. He studied ancient Egyptian and ancient Roman gods, the gods of war and all that stuff. He believed that one day we could take humans and put them on Mars. He believed that at a very young age. So he really became fascinated with space exploration and interplanetary exploration. So Hitler appointed him as the head rocket scientist for Germany. And as everybody on here knows, Hitler militarized that. So von Braun actually created the V2 rocket, and he created that development. And after Hitler's rise to power, he became the technical director for the I can't pronounce that name, Pinamadu Army Research Center. He led the team that developed the V2 rocket, the world's first long-range guided ballistic missile. The V2 was technological breakthrough capable of reaching the edge of space, but it was also a weapon of terror used by Nazi Germany to attack London and Antwerp. The rockets were built using forced labor from concentration camps, particularly Dora Metalbua. I know I botched that, so I apologize. A dark and controversial chapter in von Braun's career. Despite his later claims that he was apolitical, von Braun joined the Nazi Party in 1937 and the SS in 1940. Want to remind people he probably didn't join that on his own accord. He was probably forced into that, or they were going to kill his family. It's kind of how Nazis rolled. Blake, I don't know if you want to.
I mean, they definitely had sway. I mean, they definitely had sway over common people. That's for sure. That's the real reason they existed in the first place, was to essentially create a new regime. A new regime. That's the reason they existed in the first place.
They also, in the center, the facility that these guys were doing the research in, the front doors that they would walk into the facility, they would hang people, dead bodies of scientists and people who disagreed with them. So the first thing you saw when you walked in was your colleagues dead who didn't abide by the rules set forth by the Nazi Party.
Quite a deterrent from disagreeing.
Yeah, 100%.
But I think because there are actually a couple scientists I was looking up while you were sort of talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple of scientists that were responsible for the lunar landings, if we're talking about, NASA in general. So I would say probably the lunar landings, like we were alluding to before, like you said, your grandfather worked on the modules.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the most, I would say, as far as exploration of space goes, that's probably the ones that people would know the most. Like if I say Apollo missions, you at least know somewhat of what I'm talking about and where you're going and where they took place and all that kind of stuff. They're probably the most common exploration missions that NASA has done. And so Wernher von Braun is actually one of the key scientists, which I thought that sort of checks out.
Yeah, that was Operation Paperclip, and the move to the U.S. 1945, 1950. So basically what the U.S. did is they went to von Braun surrendered to the U.S. military, and the United States government basically said, like, if you and your team surrender, we'll take you to the U.S. and then you're going to work for us under our space exploration program, and you can work for us and not get killed. So
yeah. So Wernher von Braun was obviously one of them.
Worked with Walt Disney, by the way.
So here we go. Key scientific leaders were von Braun, Robert Gilruth. He was the director of the Manned Spacecraft Center, now Johnson Space Center. So I'll just run through them. So Wernher von Braun, German-born rocket engineer, led the Marshall Space Flight Center and was the chief architect of the Saturn V rocket that carried Apollo missions to the moon. Robert Gilruth, the director of Manned Spacecraft Center, now Johnson Space Center. He oversaw the design, development, and testing of the Apollo spacecraft and guided the program through critical decisions. And James Webb was the NASA administrator from 61 to 68. Webb managed the vast Apollo program, including its 35,000 NASA employees and 400,000 contractors. Pioneering mathematicians and programs were Katherine Johnson and Margaret Hamilton. And then Mission Control was Chris Kraft, Rocco Petrone, and Joanne Morgan. And then we obviously go deeper into that with the astronauts. Everybody should know who Neil Armstrong is, Apollo 11, Buzz Aldrin, Apollo 11, and Michael Collins, Apollo 11. So essentially, I would think we can all agree that the most famous mission in the lunar landings was 11 when they went to the moon. Can we both agree on that? It's probably the most significant one.
I would say that's the most significant, and I would say it's the most controversial. Did we actually go to the moon?
Yeah, I mean, that begs the question is that, like, we both saw something in the documentary that we watched that was kind of wild. I mean, I knew the fact that there was a question of whether the lunar landing actually took place when they went to the moon in Apollo 11. There was always a question, but I think the rabbit hole, it sort of took it down with not just the landing itself, but like what was going on during the landing, what was happening before and after. So you want to sort of dig into that a little bit, and we can talk about sort of, but let's sort of start with the fact that it was fake. Like, I guess my question would be, is it plausible to think that it was or wasn't? Where do you stand on that? Do you think it was real or do you think it was fake, and why?
I don't know. My grandfather worked on that. That was his job. He worked at TRW, and my grandfather he was self-taught. He had an 8th grade education, and he taught himself quantum physics and all sorts of shit. He worked on a farm. He was a genius, and
So essentially, your grandfather was an autodidact. So he basically, that's pretty crazy. Because I mean, I'm not a math person. I never have been a math person. Math and I don't really get along. But I would have to believe something like quantum physics was pretty intricate, and it's not for everybody, and it's something that you would have to spend years upon years. Even once you understand it, there's probably so much more. It's kind of like technology in that respect, which
he taught himself
which most science fields are. I mean, you're going to learn as much as you want to up until you press the envelope, and then you learn even more than that.
Well, he stopped going to school in the 6th grade. He's taught himself quantum physics in the 8th grade. His mother would buy him one book a year for Christmas. And yeah, so he was self-taught. Anyway, he ends up working for NASA. I've seen a lot of footage from that landing, and the theory is they either pre-recorded or they recorded stuff in a sound studio to make it look like what they saw on the moon. And then they did have some legit moon recordings. The other interesting things that I saw in the documentary were they actually, when they landed on the moon, and the first thing they did was they had a certain amount of things that they had to recover, because between Russia and the US, there was a race to go claim ancient alien technology, and who would ever get there first. It was like a race to get there first so that you could claim, what society could claim that technology, and they would get a huge boost to blah, blah, blah. It was almost like a game that the aliens were playing. My theory on it is we have had a space program for a very long time. It's a secret space program that even NASA, I'm sure the very top high-end people at NASA know about it, but I think the majority of NASA employees don't know about it, including astronauts, by the way. Probably don't know about it, but there are things on the dark side of the moon, and there's things on Mars that are very intriguing. As far as the moon landing conspiracy, the moon landing was filmed on Earth. The claim is that Apollo 11 landing in 1969 was filmed on a soundstage or military base because NASA feared failure in the space race with the USSR. Evidence cited by conspiracists is no stars visible in the sky in the Apollo photos, shadows falling at odd angles. The American flag appears to wave despite the moon having no atmosphere, which technically isn't true. The moon does have a very low atmosphere. Debunked by the camera exposure was set for the bright lunar surface so stars wouldn't show. Uneven terrain explains strange shadow angles. And the flag had a horizontal rod, so it looked like it was waving during setup. Blake, I know you had mentioned this during our off-the-air talk. Stanley Kubrick directed it. So the claim is Stanley Kubrick, fresh off 2001: A Space Odyssey in 1968, helped NASA fake the footage. Evidence cited by conspiracy theorists is Kubrick's mastery of realistic space visuals, alleged hidden confessions from The Shining.
Yeah, I saw that one too. That one's wild. Read that one.
Yeah, so all it says is Danny wearing an Apollo 11 sweater. You want to go into that a little more since you watched that?
Yeah, because you're too much of a wuss to watch The Shining, which another great movie if you want to watch something that's sort of out there and ghoulish. And,
I watched it, asshole, so thank you very much.
Yeah, probably with a blanket over your head. Anyways, any hoozle.
Wow.
So the Apollo 11 one on his sweater, it actually has an 11 at the bottom of the rocket. So that's interesting. There's also in the reference when he's doing the repeating of the pages on the book that he does within the movie. There's said to be the A and the two L's line up to be A11, so Apollo 11. And then there's one more that's in there as well. I believe the twins that Danny sees in the hallway, reference the Gemini program. So all of those three things are like the telltale signs within The Shining that people say, quote unquote, are the conspiracies being masked or trying to be encrypted with. So kind of far-fetched, but it makes an interesting case. I mean, if you've ever seen A Space Odyssey, it's it's a movie, but at the same time, it's kind of like out there as far as how realistic it actually looks. So that's where the sort of the conspiracy theory takes hold, is that he was able to do it once, and why wouldn't he be able to do it again?
What's your thoughts on it?
I think the Stanley Kubrick thing is a little far-fetched. I think that's a little out there.
Why?
I think why? Because I mean, imagine like the type of equipment they would have had to have up there. Let's just say, because there's also the notion that he traveled with them and that he did the recording from the moon. That's the other side of the coin. That wasn't done in a movie studio. He actually flew with them in the lunar module and shot everything while they were there. That's the other side of the coin. I have a hard time believing that they would put at risk a human being that's never been to space. If we've been to space initially, that's kind of weird to me. I don't know why you would do that if they haven't had sufficient training.
You think?
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, they might do it.
I mean, like I said, it's far-fetched. There's a possibility, but you're asking me what I think.
No, I know, but I'm saying, like, back then, back in the 60s, they might have done it. They didn't really think about.
Yeah, they might have done it. I'm not saying it was foolproof or that they didn't. I'm just saying there's a chance.
Right. Yeah.
But what I'll also say is that there's a lot of stuff with the lunar landing that they have a counterpoint for. Like, I don't know a lot about telemetry or like the way light works or anything like that, but I mean, having no stars, we all know the like the parameters that involve light pollution on Earth. Right. So like when we have too much light in the area, you can't necessarily see the stars. That makes plausible sense to me.
Right, and the cameras were back then, they were nowhere near what they are now.
Like, you're talking about like CGI effects and stuff. Like, I don't know, man. Like, I have a hard time believing that they'd be able to fake something like that. And like I said, it seems like there's counterpoints to every argument, every wild theory there is. there's a counterpoint to counteract it that somewhat makes sense. It's not like the type of shit that we were talking about a couple episodes ago, towards the beginning of the podcast when we started this, about like they're blaming it on a weather balloon. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
there's plausible facts in place that make it believable.
100%.
Now, one
there's
other
a
thing I'll
lot
say.
of
Now, one other thing I'll say is the whole thing that you mentioned with the astronauts. I fully believe that astronauts don't fully know what they're doing or what they're supposed to be doing. I would agree with you on that 100%.
as far as them going ahead and doing, like, there was
As
a
far
whole
as them going
other,
and doing stuff that's not necessarily of their understanding. Like, they're doing stuff, but they don't really know what they're doing. They're just doing what they're told versus the real truth of what's actually going on behind the scenes. I do agree with you on that.
need to know basis.
100%. And I do agree with you with
Yes.
that. But
I
what
would
I'm
agree with that
saying
as well.
is that there's a lot of parameters that make sense because there's a plausible reason they make sense. Like, my best point to sort of drive that point home is the light pollution thing. If you're in a dark wooded area, you have a much easier time of seeing stars than you would in a city like New York City. You're never going to see stars like you do out in the woods. Period.
Absolutely not. That's why, do you remember when that power outage happened when we were in like 6th or 7th grade in New York? Do you remember
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, it was like a big blackout. Yeah.
Yeah, people were like reporting shit in the sky as like alien whatever, and the police were like, "Yeah, no, that's the Milky Way galaxy.
Yeah, right.
You can you can just see the stars now. There's
Right.
nothing to worry about."
But like, imagine if you were in New York, you would just see a regular sky. You would see black sky. You wouldn't see all the, like, it's us. It's like us living where we lived as kids. You could go out your back door in your house and literally, like your dad, for example, had the telescope. Unfortunately, I never got to use the damn thing. I wish I would have, because I probably would have seen some really cool shit.
Hey, guess what?
I know you have it, but what I'm saying is your dad was probably the person that knew how to use it the best and was able to, like, I'm sure you know how to use it too. I just regret not being able to do it with him, I guess is my point. Is that was one of the things that we always said we
Yeah.
would do, and we never got a chance to. So
Yeah, I agree with that. I am planning on, I talked to Brennan about it because, like, out here, I don't have the same trajectory and there's a lot of light pollution, but where Brennan's house is,
yeah, he's set much more in, like, not necessarily the wilderness, but it's much more rural, I
oh
guess
no,
is my point.
he's in the boonies.
But
He's
like I
definitely
said,
in the
it's much
boonies.
more rural than it is
Yeah.
metropolitan, which if you're
Yeah.
anywhere where
So,
there's like street lamps and stuff like that, you're not going to see jack.
yeah, no. So the plan is to take it to his place, especially because he's on a hill too. He's
So he's
elevated.
elevated. That's even better.
So the plan is to take it there and get it set up there and work on that there. But congratulations to Brennan and Sabrina and Bubba. They just adopted a baby girl. So they have a newborn baby girl. So they're gonna be busy for a little bit. So we're gonna try to do that later on in the year. But yeah, the plan is to eventually get that telescope set up and reactivated so we can take a look at some cool shit.
But back to
As
your
far,
question, I guess where I stand on the, just to get back to your question, just to sort of round out my
yeah,
answer,
yeah,
I believe it happened. I do. If I happen to, if I happen to find out otherwise, will I be surprised? Not necessarily. Will it sort of spin me a little bit? Sure, but it wouldn't be like an earth shattering surprise. I can see both sides of the coin. I'm sort of indifferent to it. But do I think it happened for me personally? Yes, I do. I think it was a real thing.
okay. I think that it happened too. I think that we went there. I think that there's a lot of anomalies on the moon and Mars that are very interesting. Buzz Aldrin is one of the astronauts who says that there were structures on the moon when they got there, and there's certain government files that you can look at and see where there are structures and there's a bunch of different stuff. Mars too, which I know there's a book and I forget the name. I'll try to remember the name, but there's a book that describes an ancient nuclear war between two civilizations on Mars that decimated the entire planet. and that we are actually ancient ancestors of those civilizations. They came here because they fucked their whole planet up, which, leave it to human beings. I could totally see us doing that. We tend to like to fuck shit up.
Yeah,
I don't know
but
how
I
you feel
mean,
about that.
the human race is just we're consumers. We consume, no matter if it's
Hmm.
environmentally, media wise. That's what we're built to do. We're built to consume and sort of push forward and prosper. Like I said, we sort of said it on the podcast too that the driving force between us and the animals, because we are an animal. Let's just call a spade a spade. We are animals, but the difference
100%.
between us and everything else is we have sort of a driving force that sort of pushes us forward. We have to have something to reach for because, like I've said all the time, like I say all the time, you're not pushing forward, you're stagnant. So,
Right. So, can you see my screen here?
yeah, I know. I was going to allude to this a little bit too, but go ahead.
Okay. So, yeah, this is a face that they recorded on Mars. What do you think?
There's two sides of the story because I've seen both arguments. So, we'll put up, Danny, just take note of these websites so we can put them up. So we're going to we're going to update some of the episodes to make sure that you guys have links to some of the stuff we're talking about. So it's not just all, bullshit that we're throwing at you. You actually see the actual images and articles and documentaries and stuff that we're talking about. So what we're looking at here is there's been reported on the, surface of Mars of I guess it's the figure of a human face. It has eyes, it has a mouth, it has a nose. So that's the conspiracy theorist side of the coin. The other side is that we're looking at like a very, very like drawn out, blown out picture at the right angle and that kind of stuff as far as time, shadow depiction and all that kind of stuff. And it's basically just a rock formation. That's the other side of the conspiracy theory. Um, it would depend. I would have to see for this to be a definitive thing of like life or like a mummified person or something like that on the surface. I'd have to see at what altitude and definitively what altitude the picture was taken. So I mean, like we've all seen stuff. It's like seeing like stuff in your soup and stuff like that, right? Like it could just be the way that something formed doesn't necessarily have to mean anything. But it's an interesting notion, just the fact that it looks so symmetrical too. Um, that's the other big kick
Right.
I get out of it is that it looks like a symmetrical face. I mean, shadows play tricks on us, but how you know what I mean? And it also brings up, I take it to something really rudimentary too, is we're talking about like, think for instance, shadow puppets, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
like you can make a shadow puppet that looks like a dog and you sort of have the same thing going. So which side is true? I don't know. That's the crazy question is it really something that's mummified on the surface of it, or is it just a rock formation that looks cool because of the date, time, place, all that kind of stuff?
Right. And I think this projection, and for everyone that can't see, there's 3 photos. The first photo looks like a face. Second photo looks like it's deteriorating. And the last photo, it's almost gone, which that photo's in 2001. You would think, and this is just me being an idiot, you would think if the photo on the left is from the 60s or 70s,
I would say that's
you would,
probably a good place to stop.
right? You would think if that photo's from that time point, if Mars has been fucked up and nuclear for as long as it supposedly has, you wouldn't think from 76 to 2001 there would be that much deterioration. Like, how is it going to survive for thousands, if not millions of years, and then within like a 35-year span of 40 years, boom, it's just going to the whole face is gone? That's weird to me. That's
So
just me,
where do you
though.
stand on the argument? I guess is my point. Do you think it's a rock formation that the light just hit it at the right angle, or what are we dealing with here, in your personal opinion?
Personal opinion, I think that if you look, because of how, see how like the image on the left, very raw, and then image on the right, it like very detailed. I think maybe if you were NASA, like, if you were trying to hide something, wouldn't you try to, like, purposefully distort it?
Yeah, like I guess I see what you're saying is that if you look at the one on the left versus the one on the right, eh, the only thing that's changed is probably like the detailedness of the photo, like like the intricate details of like the one on the right has like crooks and crannies and that kind of stuff. That could just be a more higher powered lens, more high powered camera, right?
Right, right.
So what I guess my contention is that it looks kind of like a blown out rock formation to me.
Yeah, but, like, how could 30 years of deterioration go from the left to the right? But, I mean, unless we're saying that there's only 1,000 years of deterioration for this fucking thing before the left to the current left. Like, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I just feel like that's a very advanced deterioration between those three pictures compared to, like, I don't know. There's a lot of, you know, here we can go
So this
to
is the reason why I don't think it could be. So while you're looking that up, so I just looked up what Martian soil is made out of and what it's good for.
okay.
So it says it's rich in some elements such as iron, silicon, magnesium, and calcium, but lacks essential organic matter. It has low nutrient bioavailability and poor water holding quality or capacity. The soil also contains harmful salts like sulfates and perchlorates, which are toxic and need to be neutralized for plant growth. So if you're talking about organic matter, which would be a body, at least a human body is made up of organic matter, right? We
Mhm.
deteriorate over time. That's why I don't see it being a body or a mummified body of something that we're familiar with, because it would have
Do you think
deteriorated by now based on what's in the soil.
do you think it could be like a pyramid or a rock sculpture?
I do, but that's what I'm saying is I don't think it's a person. I don't think it's an entity. I think it's like
Right.
a mass of land in some form or fashion. Now,
Like
whether it's a
like
pyramid, a hill, a mountain,
the Sphinx,
yeah, something like that, like
right?
something that's made of
Okay.
stone or something that's well, excuse the pun, concrete, right?
Yeah. So do you see these pictures here?
Yeah.
Okay, so these are pyramids on Mars.
So like that's my point, right?
These
Is that like there's sort of the same type of geometric shape as you would find here.
they're they are the exact same shape. Actually, so right here, if you can see on my screen, the image to the left, these are the pyramids of Egypt, which we've talked about on previous episodes, being Orion's belt, correct?
Yep, correct.
Okay, here are three mounds on Mars. Look at
Same
that.
geometric location.
Location, shape, everything to the distance. How about that
Yeah,
with the different levels?
well, yeah, I mean, it begs the
This one's
question of
always good.
like, it begs the question of like, where else, and I think it's interesting, it sort of ties into the question is how many other places that we can't get to right now have this exact same setup?
Right.
And what is it all pointing to? Is it just like,
Well,
is it all like, we talked about in the previous episode about pyramids, since we're on the topic, of course, how we talked about them being sort of markers of like where you are on the planet. Maybe it's the exact
yes,
same tradition or exact same idealism depending on the planet that you're at. And maybe that
that's
stretches
interesting.
across the solar system and the universe. Maybe it's just all interconnected and it's all landing zones and that kind of thing.
So, what you're saying is that pyramids are essentially like a basis of travel throughout the universe?
So yeah, like we talked about the fact that they were, we alluded to the fact that it might, pyramids might be a conduit or the actual physical thing that envelops you to be able to time travel, right? We alluded that in the last episode, 2 episodes ago, when we talked about pyramids. So, like I said, is it interdimensional travel? And with the pyramids, what do you have to do to activate it? That's the real question. Is that if they are indeed vessels to do that, is there a way to activate them? Is it like a portal? Is it a key? What do they use for the activation process? I think would be interesting to find out too. But again, going back to what I use, I always say, do we really want to know the answer to that question? That's what we really have to ask ourselves. Do we really want the answer?
Yeah, for sure. And it like, can you see this picture right here? Okay. Like, that doesn't happen in nature very often. It
I mean, if you're
happens,
talking about, I mean, neither
but
does a pyramid, right? Is that a pyramid
correct.
is very down to a mathematical measurement. You like a square is not a pyramid. A pyramid's not a square. Like it comes down to the math. It comes down to where how everything lines up as far as mathematics and geometry and that kind of stuff.
So, what's your theory on this? Do you think there was a nuclear war disaster that happened, or what? Like, what could this be?
As far as a nuclear disaster, I don't know enough about Mars to know like its atmosphere and stuff like that. I would have to look that up. But
Very
we've
high,
had go ahead.
very high levels of nuclear radiation. Now,
Okay.
I want to, I want to remind you, Mars doesn't have an atmosphere anywhere near where we do. So the radiation from the sun is hitting that at a high level. So that could be what you know what I mean? Like I'm trying to
Well, I mean, if
explain
you're
that
not
off.
protect, well, the whole thing that getting off on our tangent here, the whole thing that protects us from the sun rays in the first place is the ozone, right?
Correct.
So if you don't have an ozone layer, if we don't have protection from the sun, we'd literally burn to a crisp. We're that close to it, and that close is very relative compared to other planets. That's why you have like places. I think it's Neptune. That's like literally like an ice planet. Which one is that? I can't remember. Is it Neptune?
I know Uranus is very cold. I know Pluto.
But essentially,
I think
I guess
Neptune.
what I'm saying is the farther you get away from the sun, you're going to be colder. So it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if we didn't have the ozone layer, we're so close to the sun that we would literally die from the exact same thing. That's what's protecting us from radiation and being actually burned, by the sun's rays. So everybody wonders why they get sunburn. It's because it has the ability to do that. Now, what's protecting us is the atmosphere and the ozone layer. But imagine if that wasn't there, how much worse it would be.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's even like images like
Yeah,
this
that one
one
was
that
crazy. The figure that they see and
yes.
the shape. So that to me, that's a little far fetched. Again, another picture that we'll sort of post. Um, it looks like a rock formation. I mean, it looks like a spike or something like that, or like a maybe even a pillar. You want to call it that? A pillar of rock that just sort of juts in the air. Um,
My
I
my
don't know. I
thing
don't know
is
how
like
you feel about that.
I
I think I think that's some trick photography at work there.
it could be true to photography. The only thing that I think's interesting is right here. Can you see that where my mouse is?
Yeah, it looks like an arm.
Yeah, it looks like an arm and a head.
Well, that's what I'm
But
saying. Is I'm wondering if it. I mean, it could be something to the effect too that like maybe it's some kind of like maybe it's some kind of like we have statues from like the Roman period, Roman history and Greek mythology of gods being chiseled on, you know,
right.
making sculptures of gods and things like that. Could be something like that. 100%. Because we have statues all over the place. We have statues for presidents. We have statues for, we have memorials for war and all sorts of stuff. Like it's definitely plausible that there's something on there that was been chiseled into rock or something like that. But do I think it's necessarily a living, breathing entity? Not necessarily.
No. I think that this could be like a sculpture.
Yeah, it could be like another marker.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, 100. This one's interesting too because you got like the ear with the nose, the
Yeah,
eyes, the
but like
mouth.
I could show you the exact same kind of shit if like we went to Pictured Rocks in Michigan. It's the exact same thing.
100%.
That there's a natural formation of rock that looks like something that we're familiar with, right? And you also have to take into the account that people will, they will give into the fact that their eyes are tricking them and see something that's not really there, right? That's
Yeah,
it's an
100%.
actual phenomenon. It's not just something like you know what I mean? There's actually an explanation for it. So I guess that's my sort of roundabout for all of this sort of conversation is that if you take stuff like the lunar landing and you take stuff like space travel in general, The other really weird one that I thought that we should touch on that I thought was pretty fucking crazy too was the fact that NASA as an organization doesn't even exist. It's all a hoax.
Correct.
I thought that was kind of wild because if you think the amount of time and money and resources that they would have to pour into to make that plausible is wild.
It is.
Like it like that one out of the 5 that I saw was the most far-fetched one. Like you want to talk about duping people. I mean, holy crap, you founded an entire organization that doesn't even exist and it's just literally hemorrhaging money from taxpayers. Like, I mean, I've heard of some crazy shit happening, but that's a little crazy to me. I don't believe that one for a second.
There's parts of it that I could believe.
Well,
There's
yeah,
parts
but
of
I'm
it I
talking
could
about
believe.
all encompassing the entire organization was just a fabric of people's imagination. Like,
Yeah,
that's
no,
absurd.
I don't believe that. I do believe that it could be a front runner for a black ops organization.
Well, what I'm saying is that the organization exists.
Yes,
Do we know
100%.
do we truly know what it's for and what it's here to do? Probably not. I mean, that you could say that with pretty much anything in life that's involving either the government or like there's probably and whether it's there's a couple reasons for that. I mean, the ones I can think off the top of my head are to save us from ourselves. Like I talked on this podcast before, talk about it all the time. I'm a big believer in not fucking with shit until it makes itself relevant and we need to know about it. Because we're testing things that we don't have a full understanding of. We're just sort of hanging by the seat of our pants type shit with some of this stuff.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that one. I think that there's probably a lot of black ops operations that we don't know. I mean, like we've talked about on here before, like Area 51, right? Everybody thinks that Area 51 is the place where all of the alien spacecraft technology from the Roswell crash to blah, 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 all the other ones were taken there, which
essentially you're talking about Area 51, the facility, not necessarily the Roswell incident, and to be specific, right? You're talking about the general, like,
just
you're talking about the general program of Area 51 and the actual physical building and like what it was for.
Correct. And for how long did the United States government say Area 51 doesn't exist? It's non-existent, blah, blah, blah. Then 70s fucking years later, we finally get declassified documentation that proves that Area 51 is real and it's exactly where everybody thought it was and blah, blah, blah. Everybody in the UFO UAP community now knows, from whistleblowers to ex-military and Air Force pilots and everybody, they know that where the actual location of the crashed UFO debris and the alien bodies and everything, they weren't actually transported to Area 51. They were transported to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, which Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio was the headquarters for Project Blue Book, which was a UFO deep secret organization that was investigating UFO encounters and abductions and all sorts of stuff like that. You know, you got that book that I sent you, right?
Yeah, I've read a little bit of it. I haven't like deep dived into it, but I've read a little bit of it. I think I've read a couple chapters. But I think the coolest thing about the Blue Book stuff and the stuff that they released, 5, 6, 7 years ago when they first got into it. And I think within the last, I want to say 5 years or so, 5 or 10 years, essentially there has been a lot of newfound information. The information has been much more finite and much more true and giving details and being specific and that kind of thing. So the really crazy part about this is that we were essentially bold-faced lied to and told that this stuff didn't exist. We were all crazy. All these first-hand accounts are bullshit. Nobody knows what the hell they're talking about. We're giving you factual information. And then you literally flip it on its ear not 70 to 80 years later, whatever the time frame was. I'm assuming it's at least that long. And you have all these politicians, scientists, directors of different department agencies and the CIA and the FBI and all of this stuff coming to light. And it really begs you to ask questions about a lot of other stuff too. It's not just the moon landing. It's not just the stuff that has to do with the lunar modules. It's not just stuff that has to do with NASA in general. It has to do with everything the government does. Do we question what our government is really up to? My question to it would be, yeah, because they've already alluded to the fact that they've lied to us about this is just one small example. When we're 50, what are we going to be privy to that we're not privy to right now? When we're 75, how much is 25 years going to change? Like
so much. Much.
Like you've already opened up, and I refer to it all the time because I think it's a great analogy of what we have to deal with on the show, is that we're dealing with stuff that's a Pandora's box mentality. We're being shown the box and we're constantly peeking it to the point, do we really want to open the damn thing and figure all this shit out? Because there might be no way to return from that. Once we open it, once we sort of figure out what we're really dealing with, and God forbid it's smarter than us, it doesn't need us anymore, we're done, dude. Like, if it's really that advanced and ahead of us, what point are we here for? It's kind of it's just wild.
Well, I mean, this NASA experiment and everything with NASA and everything we're talking about, a lot of this, if we really want to get into it, goes into the JFK assassination, which, if we're going to get into that, I think we should do a whole separate episode of that. But this ties into that because JFK was fascinated with going to the moon and outer space.
Well, he was also seated at the presidency when all this stuff sort of happened, when it was sort of like the height of what we were doing. I mean,
100%. And supposedly he wanted to disclose the information, and he got shut down. Two things. He wanted to get rid of the Federal Reserve and the banking industry, and he wanted to disclose the information of we're not alone. And he got killed because of it. And you want to go into a deep dive? We can go to we could do an entire, like, probably 4 to 6 episode series on that. But, and we might want to do that in the future. But that Kennedy wanted to win the space race against Russia. Russia, if you remember, they really beat us into space with Sputnik. And then it was kind of like, hey, the fuck are we doing? Like,
I guess the reason we won is that, like, you talked about the fact that, Buzz Aldrin in interviews and stuff like that, and recorded media has talked about the fact that there were structures on there. So, like, did we just figure out faster than them that was the place to be, or what really happened with all that? Like, it begs a lot of questions.
My theory is that,
because how, as advanced as their technology was and being up there already, why wouldn't they have that knowledge too? That's sort of why I'm asking the question.
My theory is that the United States and Russia and China and a lot of the powers to be knew all the same shit. They probably were debriefed on a lot of it. And there was like hey, this is here. Whoever can get here gets this. Almost like a little challenge. Like, hey, can these monkeys actually fucking do this? Because that's essentially what we were. If you want to look at ancient astronaut theory looks at, we were a bunch of fucking monkeys, and then one day we figured out nuclear technology, and we had this awesome bomb, and then we also figured out rocketry, symmetry, and all that, and we were like a ticking time bomb. And because if you look at history, it doesn't matter what continent you look at, it doesn't matter what time period you look at, there is always some type of written documentation, whether it's hieroglyphs or actual written stories in history of UFOs, UAPs, all that shit. One of the earliest written documentaries of alien UFO encounters is, I don't know if you read this in your research, is Christopher Columbus. Did you read that?
No, I haven't heard anything about that.
Okay, so you might want to look this up while I'm talking, but Christopher Columbus actually wrote in his journal, in his logs, he logged that he saw a lighted object in the sky shoot into the water and go into the water. And this was between his journey from Spain to the Americas. This lighted object orb shot from the sky into the water, and he could see it glowing in the water, and all of a sudden disappeared.
Yeah,
Which,
so here, I just found it, so I want to give them some context.
like, our U.S. military sees that shit right now.
Yeah.
We actually have more USO, which is underwater submersible, unidentified submersible objects, aka underwater objects, than UFOs, which is flying objects. So there's more crazy shit going on in the water than in the sky. So, and Columbus detailed that. So go ahead.
Yeah, so the general overview is Christopher Columbus documented a sighting of an eerie flickering light on the night of October 11th, 1492, which some modern interpretations identify as a UFO. The light seen from the deck of the Santa Maria vanished and reappeared, moving up and down and even seemed to rise from the water. While Columbus's log described it as a mysterious light, it has been interpreted as one of the history's earliest recorded potential UFO or UAP sightings, though it could also have been a natural atmospheric phenomenon. So it says interpretation. So it could have been a UFO or UAP. The unusual and unexplained nature of the light has led to speculation that it was a UFO. The sighting is often cited as one of the earliest documented encounters with a mysterious aerial phenomenon. Another interpretation is it's just a natural phenomenon. Alternatively, it could have been a natural event, such as a misidentified atmospheric or oceanic light, a comet, or a shooting star. And then last but not least is Columbus's perspective. Columbus himself does not specifically call it a UFO within the text. He described it as a light and initially thought it might be a sign of land. He used the observation to guide the search for land, which ultimately led to the discovery of the coast, which is interesting. So again, we have an instance of a marker. So was it something that a UFO happened to sort of like shoot over and pinpoint it? You know what I mean? Like we would like pinning a thing on our GPS or something like that. You know, that kind of thing. Right, exactly.
Drone, yeah.
And it did some kind of, luminary identifier, right? It shot down or something like that, whatever the case is. But essentially, there's three different schools of thought that it was either a natural phenomenon, a UFO, and that so that there's two really. And then his perspective, he never called it, what they wouldn't have known UFO back then. It probably wasn't a thing, but would have called it something like a unexplainable phenomenon or something to that effect. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. There was a study done, and they took the top scientists all over the world. I forget how many people were on this panel, but they asked them, supposedly, this is according to David Poltoff or whatever his name is. He's worked on several patents for propulsion and blah blah blah. Supposedly they asked a panel of scientists, and they locked them in a room, and they said, you need to come up with whether, this was in the early 2000s, the pros and the cons of revealing if we found alien life, intelligent alien life out there, what the pros and cons would be of telling the masses that this actually existed. And according to David, he said that they debated it for several days in this room, in this conference room, and the cons outweighed the pros as far as telling the citizens of the world.
So essentially, he agreed with your boy.
He said, yeah,
I ain't fucking with it, dog.
It would collapse every religious society. On top of that, you would have lawsuits out the ass because certain companies, and he didn't mention any companies, but he said certain companies would get sued because they had a advantage compared to other companies of technology that was afforded to them through government contracts. There's a couple companies that come to mind. I'm not going to say them, but you can probably use your imagination with, like this thing.
Yeah. Well, that's what's really scary. It's for anybody that doesn't see it. Obviously, you guys don't see it because there's no video. You're just holding up a cell phone. But yeah, I mean, those that also believe the fact that what they say in private is really in private these days is a complete fallacy. It's kind of scary to think that even when your phone's completely off. Well, think about this, and Dan, you brought this up all the time, and so do I. Is you guys remember, maybe, I mean, we're obviously old enough to remember this, when you were able to take the battery out of your phone?
But yeah, you can't do
It
that
doesn't
now. They
exist
do
anymore.
that on purpose. There is a phone. There is a phone, and it's called the unplugged phone that actually has a kill switch for privacy and all that shit. I'm actually thinking about getting it. I'm thinking about getting rid of this thing and getting the unplugged phone. Sean Ryan, his podcast, he's a big unplugged phone supporter. It's all about data security and being able to shut off your tracking and all that. I've been thinking about.
Because the other scary
It's a little
thing
bit
is all of that stuff is on default now. You look at
right.
computers, you look at cell phones, you look at tablets, you look at computers, it's on by default. The tracking is there when you sign up and boot the software.
Right.
You actually have to physically
Right.
go and turn a lot of that stuff off if you want it off in the first place.
Yeah, so that's what's nice about that phone that he's advertised is doesn't track you. You can turn it. You can turn off the. When you turn off the phone, you can actually turn off. It's got a switch. I'll try to look it up while I'm talking here, but it's got a switch that you can actually turn off, so that way you're not getting tracked and all that shit. I mean, I feel like there's a certain point where it's like, how crazy are we going to get with this technology shit? And we've talked about this a lot in the podcast too. Like, eventually, all of our IDs are going to be digitalized. Our facial recognition, whether you want it to be online or not, is going to be there. It's going to fucking be there, whether you want it to or not. So, at some point when do you go from trying to stop it, dealing with it? I guess. When you go from stopping it from getting there to, okay, well, how do we minimize
The
this
risk.
from happening? And like, last episode we talked about AI. That complicates it even fucking more.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
anything you take and want to extract, but that's where the whole thing comes into place about rules, regulations, who's in charge of it. We talked about that last episode, and I think that rings true to pretty much anything we're doing that's an advancement past what we're already doing. I think there needs to be I said last time that we're a democracy, sort of, we're a representative democracy, right? So a representative democracy, essentially, we have a group of individuals that thinks for us and does what's right by the governing body of individuals, right? So essentially, we have people that do what's in our best interest. Take that however you want it, put big air quotes, whatever whatever. I think that needs to be in every single facet of what we do as a society to advance things. And it needs to be objective versus subjective. I think we need to look at both sides from a very finite standpoint, whether it's mathematics or or scientific method or something like that that's definitive and has a real deal answer. And we need to look at it from that point of view. We can't take things so emotionally and learn to be more analytical and logical.
Okay. So you see this on the screen?
Yeah, I see what you're. Yeah,
Yeah, it's called Unplugged. This is the phone that I'm considering getting this. It's called Unplugged. You can go to unplugged.com. You can get this phone. It helps customers protect their private information. It's actually got a kill switch. So you can actually disengage the battery from all electronics with the flick of a switch. What do you think about that?
So essentially, it just nukes the circuit board so the battery doesn't even get any life.
Yeah, and it's got a 24/7 background VPN protection built into the.
Yeah, that's different than because you have to turn the VPN on virtual private network basically. So essentially, if anybody doesn't know what a VPN is, a VPN essentially it stands for virtual private network, and essentially what a VPN is, it masks your IP address and basically bounces it to different data centers. Me being the tech guy, sorry, I'm showing my nerd is showing.
It's okay if we have any listeners in Florida. You can put your VPN in Canada and you can jerk off. We're pro masturbation here. We don't want to block the Pornhub for you, like
But
the government has.
essentially, yeah, like I said, the VPN is essentially it's a way to bounce your IP address so it never stays stagnant. It's more of a dynamic type of utility. So, that's really cool that it had. I wonder if it's just a VPN done by, and like contracted engineers, or if they actually have a team of people that comes up and manages it. It'd be
Well,
interesting to see the
we can.
manufacturing of the phone because I mean, at brass tacks, as it looks like an iPhone.
It does.
Um, it's got
It
the same sort of
100%
idea. It's
looks
got the
like.
same
Yeah.
buttons, all that kind of stuff. So that's a little weird that it looks almost
Mm-hmm.
identical to an iPhone. That's a little eerie in my personal opinion. It looks way too form factor-ish. I was expecting it to look a little bit different. But I'm not saying
Unless
it
they have a
doesn't do the job. I'm not
deal.
saying that it doesn't, doesn't do the job and doesn't do what it's promising, but there's just little things that I noticed.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I'm really considering getting this, so if I get it, I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, if you happen to buy, and also I'd like to see the price point of it. If they have that.
Actually, here, let's look at it. Let's go buy
So
one.
it's about the same as an iPhone ish. It's about the same as an iPhone Pro. Are there different? Is it just one size fits all? Is it just one phone and there's no like Pro or Max or anything like that? It's just what it is.
Yeah, looks like this is it.
Okay. So essentially it's probably the size of an iPhone Pro or something like that. It's probably that scale of size. Um, which would work for a lot of people, but it's essentially the same. Yeah, I mean, for everything that it offers, if it's truly doing what it's supposed to be doing, it seems well worth the money for sure. But yeah, I mean, $989 outright is pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's yeah.
But like I said, I'd have to do a little bit more research before I just buy a phone. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying you haven't done the research. All I'm saying is I want to really make sure I'm getting my money's worth.
Yeah, for yourself. Yeah, I get it. 100%.
But
But I mean, looks like you can put all the apps on there
and
and
I
all
was gonna
that. It's
say
just,
too, like, what are they using? Do they develop their own app store? How does that work? That'd be interesting to find out. So if you get some information on that, I'd be interested to figure that out too.
So you want to know like who's their builder, basically?
Yeah, like who developed the phone? Was it subcontracted by anybody? Did they use former employee? You know what I mean? All those questions. We're talking about conspiracy theories. I want to know who made the phone, who's responsible for it, all that kind of stuff. If it's independent contractors, did they work for mobile companies in the past and all that kind of stuff? You know what I mean? Like I guess what the criteria is to make the phone. Like how did they come up with this idea and where it came from? It'd be interesting to find out. So, but it's an interesting idea. I mean, if it does everything that it's supposed to do, I would say it's well worth it.
Yeah.
But like I said, for my own peace of mind, I would just have to do more research to figure it out.
All right, so it looks like Unplugged was co-founded by Eric Prince. He was the founder of Blackwater and has recently relaunched the Up phone under new CEO Joe Wheel. The phone runs on Unplugged OS, formerly Libert OS, which is a fork of the Android open source project. Without Google mobile services, Unplugged claims the phone has strong privacy features like an on-device firewall, hardware kill switch, built-in VPN, and encrypted cloud. So yeah, that's the
So Joe
quick
Wheel
breakdown
sounds
of that.
familiar. I'm not sure who that is, but the name sounds familiar. But if it's made off its own OS, I feel a little bit better about that, I guess. But they
Why?
developed it's its own operating system. It's not revolving on a platform that's already put into place, like iOS or Android. It's developed off of Android software, but it's not necessarily carbon copy to what Android phones are using. Does that make sense? It's an extension of that. So that's the difference, right? If they were using like Android software, like the actual software, and not just made up their own OS based off of that platform, that's a little bit better, I guess, in my personal opinion. So, like, for example, Android, right? It's open source software, so essentially you can create things off of the platform. iOS is a lockdown or proprietary software where everything iOS, if it's not iOS, it won't mesh well. So, like, that's the whole reason why people like Apple is because it's all the same operating system, whether you're talking on an iPhone, an iPad, an iMac. It's seamless transition, right?
Right.
Android is a little bit more weird just because it's an open source platform and you can literally take the platform and make applications. You can make iOSs, you can make OSs, you can make VPNs, you can make whatever. So it's kind of like, remember how like we used to record the show with OBS? OBS is an open source software where people have the ability to make applications that you can literally use as docs within OBS. So it's an operating system that you're able to sort of pick and choose what you want inside of the environment, if that makes sense. That's what Android is versus iOS, where iOS is very like, this is the stuff that works with the platform. If you don't use this stuff, it's not going to work right. Put it like that.
You know what's interesting? This is led by a former
Yeah, that's why I
Apple
knew it.
product
Yeah, it's
leader,
led
Joe
by a
Wheel.
former
That's
Apple.
crazy.
It's led by a former
crazy.
Apple CEO or lead project designer. That's why I said it looks
Crazy.
murky. It looks weird. I don't feel good about it. I don't like that. If I'm trying to get away from all that stuff, I don't want a former high-level executive Apple employee designing my phone.
Unless he's like, hey, listen, I know how.
Well, that's where the
to get
research would come in, right? Like I would have to see him do interviews. I would have to hear his
Right.
press releases about the phone and what he thought of Apple and all that kind of stuff. If he's a
If
he's a very outspoken person against Apple, I'd feel way better about it. That just means he knows how to make a good phone.
Might be.
But that would be my question, right? So,
right.
But yeah, as far as the whole NASA thing is concerned, I mean, it would tie it back into being able to sort of hear what stuff, like how much of what we're seeing with AI and stuff is generated by the stuff that we say on a daily basis.
Well, so there's that, but have you also seen, I know you watched documentary on some different like conspiracy theories and stuff, but like, have you seen the Antarctica NASA shit?
Nope, never heard of it.
Buzz Aldrin actually tweeted right before he was airlifted for a medical emergency. His last tweet was something along the lines of like, "Oh my gosh, what have we found? What have we discovered? This is wrong." Something crazy, and he had a heart attack, and they did an emergency evacuation for him in Antarctica. And I don't know if you know, but to do any type of any contact in Antarctica is hard, let alone a emergency evacuation for somebody.
Yeah, talk about a place that has zero markers and is literally one of the most dangerous places to be at.
Yeah, it was just very,
It's just
very interesting.
it's peculiar. I think is the best way to put it. It's just sort of out of it doesn't really make sense. It's a little too easy kind of thing.
Yeah, and so basically he got airlifted out of Antarctica, and supposedly the people that were with him, there was a whole science expedition that was with him. They went down like miles beneath the surface, and they encountered these beings that could basically go through the walls and through the ice and all sorts of crazy shit. Way beyond our understanding of life and whatever. And supposedly there's a whole life form down there that we were never supposed to discover. Take that with what you will. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I
'Cause
mean, there's so much. I mean, we've been around for however long we've been around, depending on what you believe. There's still portions of even our own planet that we're not familiar with, as far as we know. That's at least what we're being told. And you can believe that or not believe it. That's your prerogative. That's completely up to you as a person and a human being. That's 100% up to you. But I think the interesting thing about the NASA stuff, just to sort of round it out as, you know, we sort of wrap up and, you know, I think that the NASA stuff, to an extent, we already know we've been lied to. But my question would be how long and how much? That would be my biggest question to people that are essentially the gatekeepers of the information. Because when we finally figure out that answer, and I always speak about this, and I spoke about it repeatedly on this episode too. Do we want the information to be public? You know, do we really want to know, and are we ready for the consequences of what we might figure out and what we might learn? Are we physically and mentally prepared for it? That's what really scares me, is that we're gonna hear some shit that's gonna completely change our reality.
but who, and here's the question, who gets to determine when we hear that
Well, that's what
and
we
why
have
we
to
hear
figure
that?
out. Is it up to us as individuals? Or is it up, like we handle everything else, at least in the United States, to a group of individuals that's literally elected and appointed by, that kind of thing? Which way do we want it?
I think that's, unfortunately, I don't agree with it, but I think that that's unfortunately the route that it goes. I think that it goes to the UN. I think it goes to these.
Well, you said there's also, and I don't know as much about this as you do, is there's the Department of Defense that's now oriented specifically towards space exploration. So,
Well, there's a whole military department. There's the Space Force.
but
There's
that's what
that.
I'm saying, is that
Yes.
there's this sect of the government, now that we know that there is intelligent life besides us. It's been documented, and we've been shown the evidence. Do we take that as what it is and expand the Space Force as a part of just being this, like, behind closed doors type of department? Now that we have the information that stuff is out there, do we expand that department? And it's not just a behind closed doors type of department where there's whispers in hallways, and if you say the wrong thing, you get pulled into wherever and told not to do it, or you'll basically disappear from existence. That type of thing, right? Like, because it's not really
Right.
it's not necessarily taboo anymore. It's been like, it's common
So,
knowledge now, right? Like, where do you draw the line?
so there's actually one of the ex-prime ministers of Canada, defense ministers of Canada, and some other high-end people in previous governments have come out, and they have actually confirmed that there is a intergalactic council, almost like how you would see in Star Wars, like the Galactic Council.
Yeah, like the Jedi
There's like
Council that presides over, like, the Jedi that are trying to become
yeah,
Jedi and whether they're worthy or not. Yeah.
yeah. So there's like an actual intergalactic council, and there's over 17 races of alien entities, creatures, beings, whatever races, whatever you want to say, that and this is where it gets interesting, because they say that there's grays, there's the insect, there's the Nordics, there's a bunch of them. I actually have a book downstairs that I can grab and look through. We can do another episode through the beings, the entities, but there's a whole galactic council that essentially we are a part of, and we've been a part of for a long time, and they basically use us as a zoo, essentially.
Yeah, so essentially, this is the people or the entities that dictate basically jurisdiction in the universe, is what you're talking about.
Yes.
who presides and who holds sway over what and for all that kind of stuff.
Yes, and there's evil ones, there's good ones.
Well, I was gonna
there's all
say
sorts of
that's
shit.
my. But I guess getting back to my point, should we know about that? Like, should we know who they are?
Think we should, but there's also the whole Anunnaki theory, which comes into play with what you talked about at the very beginning of the episode, I'm gonna botch it.
I think it's
Nibiru or
Nibiru. Yeah, Nibiru.
Nibiru, planet Nibiru, that makes its passing every, like, I think 7 or 10,000
No,
years.
they said, I believe it said 3,600, 3,500, 3,600, something like that.
Whatever. It's supposedly making its way here, like, right now, which makes everything even crazier right now. I don't know.
Well, that's the whole thing. Is the whole thing about that planet is that it's like it's a planet that's deemed or an entity or some kind of like malevolent force that's supposed to like lay waste to Earth. That's essentially
so
what they were categorizing it as.
Essentially what happened is they fucked their atmosphere like we did, like we currently are. They fucked their atmosphere, and then what happened is the reason the Anunnaki came here was to mine gold. Do you remember that whole ancient
Yeah, I remember
Egypt,
that story.
like,
Yeah.
Okay. So the reason they came here was to mine gold because gold is what they use. It's a very rare mineral in the universe, the galaxy, universe, whatever. And our planet has a high density of gold. And they use this gold essentially to put into their atmosphere to block the sun particles to cool their planet. That is why we were created off of them, was to be their slaves for gold. That is the Anunnaki theory in a very small nutshell.
Yeah. There's obviously different points and POVs to that story, but I sort of get what you're saying for sure.
So it's
So
interesting.
I sort of gave my piece on where I stand generally. Where are you at with, let's just say, the NASA thing? Like, where do you stand on it?
I would stand on, I definitely think we've been to the moon 100%. Do I think that the videos of us being on the moon are 100% authentic? No. I definitely think we've been to the moon. I definitely think that we have bases on the moon, especially nowadays. I don't believe the narrative that we went to the moon and we did all these Apollo missions and then we just stopped going to the moon for 30, 40, 50 years, whatever. I don't believe that one bit, knowing how human psychology works and all
Well,
that.
you'd have to be, just to interject, you'd have to be asinine to think we're not still in space. Then is the whole space station, a big hoax and a big piece of bullshit too.
I don't think that's a hoax. I think the space station is very real. I think the space station is there, but do I think there's possibly more than one space station? Absolutely. I think that there's probably space stations, no pun intended, spaced out between here to Mars to Jupiter to Saturn, Uranus, all of it. Who's to say that we haven't been pumping out different space stations, different stuff for, since what, the 50s, Blake? Since the V2 rocket? I mean, really, let's be honest. If Warner von Braun was working with Walt Disney and they were doing all this shit and whatnot, I mean, since the 50s, 60s, we've probably been pumping out a lot more shit than NASA has been telling us. Do we
But to
have
what
a
extent is it also as an exponential?
Well, if you take into the ancient alien race and Roswell and all these alien spacecrafts that got crashed, who's to say we haven't? I mean, you look at this goddamn thing,
Yeah, the
right?
phone. Yeah,
Who's to say? Do you know that there is more technology in this device right here in my fucking hand than I'm holding up? There's more technology in this than was used to go to the moon.
right. It's in the palm of your hand now.
So, my point exactly, if that's in the palm of my fucking hand, you really think that we're not still going to the moon and exploring more things and going to Mars and maybe going to different, galaxies or solar systems,
or God forbid time traveling and that whole thing, going to multiple dimensions and
and
everything like
that
that.
could be a whole
No,
thing too.
I
I have,
100% agree
I,
with you.
you know,
I think there's a hard stop somewhere, but we're nowhere near the hard stop yet.
we're not gonna find out for a very long
And is
time.
it
And I
something
also,
that, but I keep saying, and it's important. Do we want to know what that hard stop is? Because everything that has a beginning has an end. So it's just a rule of the universe. So do we want to know, like, then it brings into the whole thing of like looking into the future and foreshadowing our own demise. Like, you know, do we want it? Is there somebody that has seen that demise and knows exactly what's going to happen? And they've been whatever side, you know what I mean? Like, it begs a lot of questions. It's interesting.
well, that could be what an empath is, right?
Yeah. Or we've talked about like doorways into dreams and stuff like that.
Yep. You know, I think there are people that have special abilities, but at the same time, I think that everybody is so worried about the future and what's happening and blah 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 blah. Blah. Enjoy the present. We don't enjoy we suck at enjoying the present
Well, yeah, I mean,
and just being
we're
like,
both guilty of it, right? We're both guilty of it, thinking too far ahead and too far back. Why can't we just, I agree with you. I think we don't live, and you notice all that stuff every now and then is when you finally do like pull yourself into what's actually going on and are present and aware of what's going on. Sometimes that's when things are the best.
you know what I love doing every once in a while? I don't do it a lot, but every once in a while, I love taking a cigar, going in my backyard, putting the fire pit on, just sitting back by the fire pit, smoking a cigar at night and looking up in the stars.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same type of thing as if you
Love that.
like go out in the field and just sort of lay back on your back and just look.
Yeah,
Or it's like that
and
phenomena that I used to do when I used to go to that park I used to love in Cleveland. Um, where it was literally I would just go there at like 4 or 5 in the morning and just literally sit there and watch the waves and listen to the ocean or the ocean,
I
the lake.
never never knew you did that.
Yeah, I used to it was a park on the west side. Not going to dox myself and say which park it was, but it was one of those things that sort of brought me back and brought me into the present, like you're talking about. Is you just sit there and sort of listen to the waves and listen to the water crashing on rocks and all that kind of stuff, and it just sort of it's like the whole grounding thing, right? Like if you're ever anxious or stuff like that, they say to ground yourself, put your feet in the grass, feel the grass, like prick at your feet and that kind of stuff. Just sort of brings you and allows you to be in the moment.
Grounding is a great thing.
I
Great,
completely
great
agree. It's
thing.
saved me a couple of times.
Mhm. And you can use grounding for yourself. You can also use grounding for fruits and vegetables and like gardens and stuff. There's a lot of benefits to it. There's a lot of ancient quote unquote technology lost in that too. There's so much stuff that we've lost because of corporate greed and all that stuff. And I hope that we can dive more into that self-sufficient non-corporate greed, living off of the ancient teachings that used to be provided to us that are no longer. And there's a lot of authors and a lot of people who have done a lot of research. Blake and I are nowhere near as qualified to talk about that stuff, but we can definitely talk about those books and get those titles for you if anybody here is interested in that stuff, because it's unbelievable when you start reading that type of stuff, because they figured out what gets rid of the bugs that eat the plants and all sorts of shit, and growing bigger plants so they're juicier and more wholesome and blah blah blah. But with, you're not adding the extra added sugars and all the bullshit. So a lot of good things. But overall, Blake, I think with this episode could be a stepstone to another episode that we can dive deeper into um the Galactic Federation and some other things. But I think this one was fun because of the, yes, he was an SS guy. I don't think he was an SS Nazi guy on his own necessarily. I think that they probably kidnapped his family and kind of forced him into like, hey, you're gonna fucking do this, and if you don't, we're gonna kill your family and make you watch and then kill you. I think Werner von Braun ultimately should be celebrated for what he discovered because he was so instrumental in space exploratory things and just he's a goddamn genius. And in a moment in time where the world was in a very dark place, he shone a light of hope in humanity to show people what good can come from a bad situation.
Yeah. I mean, I think to wrap up, I think we can both agree that the NASA thing in general, we both genuinely feel good about it. Like it was a positive decision. The only thing I would caution going forward is to make sure that we think about what we're doing and not just do it so much. I think we need to, I think our knee jerk reaction is not necessarily a great thing. And we should think about it a little bit heavier, and we should hold a little bit more of the weight on our own shoulders than we are right now. I just think it needs to be very, I use the word carefully thought out, like the two words carefully thought out, but we need to think about what we're doing and what our next step is. Because if we
Are
step,
you talking about talking about the whole like just because we can do it
yes,
doesn't mean we should do it?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
I
that's
agree with
exactly
that
what I'm talking
100%.
about.
Jurassic Park, right? Jurassic Park.
Yeah, they move it. Yeah, they move in herds. But yeah, so that's I think we can both sort of set on that agreement is that we need to be more careful about what we're doing.
So if there are, and again, we don't know 100%. We probably never will 100% until they're declassified on government documents. But Blake, do you think that there are black budget NASA space programs going on?
Well, I alluded earlier, just to wrap up on my feeling about that. I alluded earlier that I do think there's stuff in the government they don't tell us about. I think there's stuff within the construct of human understanding that they don't think we're ready for, that they have found and had to come to terms with. And, you know, best, brightest, most intelligent, that type of stuff is sort of what they look for in that sector of life. So, it's like it's the same thing as having politicians write your laws for you. We're taking it with a grain of salt that they've been to school, they've done the training and all that kind of stuff. No matter what you're talking about, we have to take it at face value.
But I think the difference is that with those politicians, we understand that they're making laws and blah 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 towards certain shit. The black budget space programs we don't know anything about. We probably should know about if they're using our goddamn taxpayer dollars to fund this black budget shit.
Yeah, but that's all coming to light. I guess that's my point, is it's slowly, surely becoming more front facing. That makes sense.
So you think it's just going to be a slow...
I think it's going to be a slow burn. Yeah, I do. And
do you think there's going to be a change at all? Do you think there should be a change?
In our lifetime, I don't know if it's going to be anything earth shattering.
Okay.
We've known or had inkling for intelligent life and that kind of stuff for a while. It's now just been proven. So people knew it was out there. It's just the ability to come out and say, hey, we fucked up, we lied, it's right here in front of you, you guys were right, that kind of thing. But to answer your question, it shouldn't have to take us having somebody like the Department of Aeronautics or anything like that to have egg on their face and say, yeah, we fucked up.
So you think like you think some like within the next like 20 years it should be like, hey, like
we should get a little bit more of the, we should get a little bigger piece of the pie. Yes, I do.
Okay.
We gave you a sliver, but you know what I really want.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it's probably going to take longer than that. I wish it wouldn't.
Well, I don't think in our lifetime are we going to have another inkling like this, no matter if it's having to do with space or something else.
So you
I don't
don't
know if
think in
I think
20
that's
years,
I think
20 years,
I think the alien
Roswell,
no, I don't.
you don't think that the U.S. government's going to declassify documents that say Roswell 100% happened and this is what happened and blah, blah, blah. I mean, they have to release information.
Well, yeah,
They
no,
have to.
but you're asking me a question. I don't think it's going to be in our lifetime.
Okay, that's fair.
Nothing that earth shattering. I don't think. Me personally, we might get something. I'm not
Okay.
saying we won't, but do I think it's going to happen in
Right.
20 years? No.
No. When do you think it happens?
Maybe there's a timeline for that too. That's another question. Maybe they're being conditioned by whoever to release it at a certain point, certain time, that kind of thing.
Do you think that that's controlled by an evil entity?
That's up for people.
Like a
That's up for people to speculate. I don't have a feeling one way or the other because I don't know enough about it.
Because there's a lot of people that think that like there's a lot of shit going on that deals with Freemasonry and
Well,
then
there's a lot of
also
people
with
that think all this stuff is going to be our undoing, making that argument that it could be our undoing or it could push us really far forward and then we're better off even better than before.
knowing humans and how we are. What do you think?
I think we consume too much. We need to leave shit alone sometimes. I've said that though. I said that on a couple of the shows, a couple of the episodes. I think we need to leave shit alone until it's apparent to us. When it makes sense, when it makes sense, it makes sense. So that's my general feeling just with anything. Not just, that's sort of my outlook on pretty much anything. Doesn't matter what we're talking about. I think we should leave well enough alone. And
I
anything
agree
that
with
we're,
you on
yeah,
a lot of that.
anything that we're supposed to know, it'll be revealed to us. It'll make sense when it's supposed to. I don't really feel like
I
pushing the
agree with a
envelope.
lot of it. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on majority of what you're saying. I do think it's interesting when you got, a lot of like some of the episodes we've talked about with like ancient pyramids and that stuff. That's interesting, right? How all that correlates, but then like, and we haven't dove a lot into this, but like the Dead Sea Scrolls and a lot of the other ancient religious texts.
Well, like we haven't really touched on a lot of religious stuff from like we've touched on like ancient culture, but we also haven't touched on like modern religion. So like
And we
Catholicism
probably
and
should,
Judaism and all that kind of
right?
stuff.
Right, we probably should do that next.
Just because that'll be a little bit more digestible because if people follow those sects of religion, it'll be interesting to sort of
Right,
figure out like the different background of those religions too.
right.
But we're gonna
And
get
how it
like
all
I like the
correlates.
yeah, exactly, and how it all sort of ties together and different stories sort of amount to the same thing, which we've alluded to in this too. But like I said a couple of times while we've done these episodes, they get very rabbit hole-ish, but it also creates a really good dialogue and it creates a good conversation. That's why we're also
Yeah, 100%.
I think I'm also excited to do it once we get a big enough following is to like I said in the previous episode at the end, is to do live broadcasts so you guys can actually like give us questions live and there'll be a chat and all that kind of stuff. I mean, we really want to do that. I think a Sunday night doing this for like 2 or 3 hours would be awesome. And it's all live, it's all interactive, and that'll make the show more fun because it'll give you guys a chance to actually partake in the conversation. Like I said, if there's topics that you guys want to sort of have us go over, we're just sort of coming up with our own, but we also want to have stuff that you guys are going to listen to and be engaged with. That's the most important thing is the conversation is engaging and it makes you think.
100%.
But I know that these conversations, even though they get rabbit hole-ish, I'm having a lot of fun doing it. Like it's gets to a point where you're just sort of pulling ideas out of like not necessarily your subconscious, but essentially stuff you weren't thinking about before, changes your perspective and sort of makes you think in a different way. I think that's the coolest thing about doing these with you, dude.
Absolutely. I'm having a good time doing it. There's so many different rabbit holes and so like even the things that we've touched on right now.
You could do an entire podcast worth of it.
Like there's so many things that we could go down. In different ancient sites, different ancient religions, different, current issues that are going on. The possibilities are endless. Please, everybody, follow us, like us, share us. Please comment. I don't care if it's a negative comment or a positive comment. We want the comments on our stuff so that way we can, see what everybody has to say and we can, kind of tailor this to what our audience likes. And
We'll never be, but
we
that's the
really
other
do.
thing. I just want to preface this, and I'm sure you'll agree with this too. We're never going to be biased towards one side or the other. We might have our own opinions.
Correct.
We might have what we believe, but we're not trying to force it on you. All we're trying to have is a conversation.
Correct. Yep.
The biggest thing is you guys think for yourselves, and we're going to have a lot of topics on here where that we want to make that paramount. We want to have our opinions. We want to sort of tell you what we think and dive into the issue or the problem or the topic. But we want you guys to make up your own minds. That's the most important thing. Is we bring you
And we're
education,
gonna
we bring you
try.
stuff from an unbiased point of view, and you guys make up your own minds. We'll give you the information and you figure it out.
Yep, and we're gonna make sure that we get those links, like to
Yeah,
those
just whenever we
documents.
have a chance, we'll upload them to the description for you guys. But as Dano said, make sure to follow us on Obscuracast. The handle is at Obscuracast on both X and Instagram. We'll be posting stuff there. Most of the time, we'll be posting clips to Instagram and we'll post them to Twitter too, or X rather. And as we sort of have stuff that we come up with or stuff to make you think, we'll be adding to those platforms, not just videos, but posts and all sorts of stuff. So make sure you guys follow that. Make sure you guys follow the podcast on Spotify. We'll try to have it up as quick as possible. And like I said, we're trying to do these on a weekly basis for you guys as much as we can. And obviously life gets in the way, but we'll try to keep as steadfast of a schedule as we can. Dan, you got anything else before we wrap up?
No, just stay weird and question everything and just go through gut instinct and don't be afraid to question a public narrative. Don't be afraid. It's okay if you get labeled as a weirdo or, people think that you wear a tinfoil hat. I got a couple different size tinfoil hats, so stay weird.
Like I said, we appreciate you guys, and we'll have this up on Spotify as quick as we can. It's also on Apple Music. I forgot to talk about that. It's on Apple Podcasts, not Apple Music.
Yeah.
So we just got on that
There we go.
platform, and then I think we're going to look and see if we can get on a couple more platforms, but at least Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify, it's on there. So hope you guys enjoyed the episode. We will talk to you guys on the next one. Take care, guys.